Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Sunday night against the Pheonix Suns. There is a world where the Knicks actually clinch the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. It would require a win tonight, as well as a loss by the Indiana Pacers to the Denver Nuggets, but the bigger headline coming into this game is that Jalen Brunson, the captain of the New York Knicks, will be making his long-awaited return after a month being away after an ankle injury. For some of you, it may not be a welcome return because you've enjoyed the 19th best offense in the NBA, but everybody getting a chance to cook over the last month, we'll see. With how well OG Anunoby has played and how well Mikal Bridges has played, especially on offense, how they can integrate all of this together. It should be a fun time having Jalen Brunson back on the court in general. And look, as much as the Knicks have had some struggles and things to complain about this year, we like to add perspective here at Knicks Film School, which is why the pregame pod is so essential. Because if you think you've had a rough time, Knicks fans, let's talk about the Pheonix Suns. So they come into this game 35-42. I believe they're now either 3 or 4 games out of the final playoff spot behind the Sacramento Kings. I believe it might actually be 2 games because I think the Kings are 36-40. I'll ask my guests in just a second. So they are the 10th best offense in the NBA, 10th in offensive rating, but they're the 27th worst defense, or I guess 27th best defense, which would make them the 4th worst defense in the NBA, which gives them the 21st ranked net rating in the NBA. A lot of questions around this franchise. They fired their coach last year. I guess they fired their coach 2 years ago to get Frank Vogel. Then after 1 season, fired that coach to get Mike Budenholzer. And now there's speculation that they may fire that coaching staff as well. And then there's the Kevin Durant and the Bradley Beal of it all. They're definitely interesting to talk about from afar. Let's see what it's like to cover them on a daily basis. Joining me from the PHNX network, the All City Network, but more specifically PHNX Suns, PHNX Sun Devils. This should be a very fun pod. Erik Ruby, welcome to Knicks Film School, sir.
Hi. First time the words fun and Suns basketball have happened in the same sentence in the last couple of months. I'm excited, man.
Well, I'm happy to have you. I apologize for my voice, by the way, to you and to Knicks fans. Yesterday was a very eventful day. Thank you to everybody that came to our watch party. Also, thank you to the New York Mets for making last night's game very exciting. And I'm sorry to talk about all these things that I enjoyed in the sports world yesterday, because I understand that it's been a rough go of it, maybe the last calendar year for Pheonix sports, whether it be what happened to the Diamondbacks at the end of the last season, obviously what happened to your hockey team in general. And now as we talk about the Pheonix Suns. So I like to start every pregame pod with the very simple question of how are the vibes? I can get an idea just from what's happened. How are the vibes? The one positive I will say is it's not Mavericks bad. You didn't trade Luka. Like, you didn't do that. But I just give Knicks fans a sense. How are the vibes in Phoenix as this very tumultuous season is looks like it's going to end pretty soon?
Probably the worst I've ever seen it. And I was telling you before we jumped on here, I'm born and raised through thick and through thin Arizona sports. I know a lot of New York fans can relate to that. And that type of passion is the type of passion that I share for my teams. I've sat through those dark days. My formative years as a sports fan, really, when you go through high school, you're really in it, where Devin Booker and Tyler Ulis and Dragon Bender and Josh Jackson, and those teams were bad, but nothing like this, because this is not just the highest payroll in the NBA. This is the highest payroll in NBA history. Yeah. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, a roster that we expected to be better than last year based off of defensive improvements and just overall taking veterans instead of unknowns. Plus, Frank Vogel, we're looking back at Frank Vogel wishing that we never fired him, when at the moment it was, hey, he lost the locker room, and Mike Budenholzer has been a complete disappointment. Being on air and talking with Suns fans every single day, I have never seen a more rejected, angry, sad fan base right now than the 11th seed Pheonix Suns fans. It's just downright awful.
So let's stay there for a second. The outrage and the upset Pheonix Suns fans, and specifically who they're upset with. I have my thoughts of whether this is pointed at the front office, maybe even ownership for putting this roster together. You mentioned Budenholzer being a disaster and what this season has been from an X's and O's standpoint. I'm curious if what happens with every Kevin Durant stop lately is that it's the ire is pointed at Kevin Durant, and then obviously Bradley Beal refusing to exercise his or I guess choosing to exercise his no trade clause throughout the most recent transaction cycle. Who are Suns fans most upset with for how this season has gone?
Just a little bit of everybody. It kind of depends on.
Let's make a pie. Let's make a pie. Who gets the slices?
Okay. So it's fluctuated throughout the season. I would say the biggest piece of the pie throughout the whole season has been Mike Budenholzer. Okay. His unceremonious benching of Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro is basically what started the full-on downward spiral of this team a couple of months ago. He's not had any consistent rotations. His starting lineups have been bad, but Bradley Beal, from a player perspective, has just been taking a beating. And I feel for the guy. He's a nice guy. He's a good family man. And I respect as a human being the fact that he has his no trade clause and that he can be happy in a situation. But from a fan perspective, 1 point against the Boston Celtics in his first game back, the on-off numbers, the overall offensive and defensive rating numbers when Bradley Beal plays, plus that vaunted eye test, are really, really bad for him this year. He's also the highest paid player on the roster and is the reason why the Suns are most likely going to have to trade Kevin Durant. And then I think KD and Book, it depends on what side of the faction you're on, but they get a pretty healthy dosage of that pie as well. Beyond that, some fans are tired of Matt Ishbia and the front office. I would say 99% of fans want some sort of change. They just pick and choose who.
So I'm very curious. You said the sides between Durant and Booker. I actually didn't think Devin Booker was getting any, if much, of the ire from fans. Is there actually an anti-Devin Booker sentiment in Phoenix?
You know, it's tough because it's hard to vet. So the same way that you guys have your live show here on YouTube and you can see comments coming in, you know, you get a lot of different perspective and tweets and stuff coming in, and you can't tell who's like diehard Pheonix Suns fans and who's not. Most diehard Suns fans do not feel that way about Devin Booker, but there's now a growing number of them that feel like, well, he can't be a number one. You can't win a championship around him. But yeah, he's been getting a lot of flack, especially because if you look at his overall numbers this season, you're like, okay, that's a good season, but scoring wise, he's lost a little bit of that killer step that he had that helped power them to the finals. The debates have been raging based off of who and why that's happening and who's causing that. But Devin Booker certainly gets a good amount of the blame and the ire. But sometimes it's from not Pheonix Suns fans, but KD stans as well. It's a blame party. Andrew, it's you get some blame, you get some blame, you get some blame, and everybody's got to deal with it.
Gotcha. So the blame party makes more sense, and it's how many cups of blame are you serving to people throughout the party? Which, look, I can absolutely understand the stan side of this. The fact that we've never really had that in New York, to be honest. There was a moment where the RJ Barrett stands were like, why he should be allowed to cook more, and why are we featuring Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson has to do this more. And once the younger players, which I think every franchise really has this, a segment of the fan base that just would rather watch the rookie and the unknown than the veteran that you could usually count on. But it's understandable that coaches lean on the thing you can count on when you're trying to win games. Look, I didn't realize Katie had stands, to be honest, because just from my time. Okay, and for those listening, the eyes that just popped out of Eric Ruby's head, I guess, could you tell me what Katie stands are like? Because I did not. In Brooklyn, they didn't exist because Nets fans don't exist. So,
man,
what are KD stands like?
Intense,
really. So on a scale of like 0 to Kobe stands, where do the KD stands rank?
Kobe.
Really? They're that passionate. Okay.
I'll tell you what, man. I'll tell you what. It's to the point where I'll tweet something completely unrelated to Kevin Durant. Obviously, it's about the Suns because that's all that I tweet about, basically. But I put that out there, and the comment is the media doesn't appreciate KD enough. You guys and it's like, whoa,
wow.
Hey, like I didn't say anything about that. And I think that there have been some local media personalities who have started fanning those fires and realizing that they can get a rise out of them. But I think that once we trade Kevin Durant to the Knicks this offseason, you'll be able to fully understand that Devin Booker could have 40 points and 25 assists, and KD could have 30 and 10. And we give out like our MVP of the game award. And if we gave it to Devin Booker, we would have KD stands in our comments saying, why are y'all disrespecting KD like that? Why are y'all not appreciating his greatness? And I've been like very big on praising him his entire time here. And I don't want him to leave this offseason, but KD stands are intense, and to a point you have to respect it, but it's borderline insanity.
So what's interesting is at one point or another over the last 5 years of this Knicks, I don't even want to say resurgence because the only way to go was up. Like, you want to say resurgence, the previous entity, I've got a Carmelo Anthony jersey over my right shoulder. There's that 1 year stretch where they were a 54-win team. I guess a 3-year stretch where they made the playoffs, but this century it's been pretty dire. And then these last 5 years, it's really just more a run of competence. And obviously they went all in for former Suns rookie and sensation Mikal Bridges, which I'm curious your thoughts. So we'll get to that a little later. But at one point or another, Kevin Durant was the target. They're like, oh, the Knicks are going to try and go all in for Kevin Durant. And at one point it was the Knicks are going to go all in for Devin Booker. And all of these, specifically Booker, because Leon Rose is his former agent. Like, that was always one of the guys that was looked at as the big fish. And we sit here in 2025, the Knicks have used all their draft capital, and now one might become available this summer. You did just mention, like, maybe they'll trade Kevin Durant to the Knicks this offseason. I mean, to your perspective, is it what kind of return do you want for Kevin Durant? Because the Knicks can't offer the pick haul that you got or you gave up for him. Like, maybe the Rockets could, and specifically the Rockets, because they have Suns picks that they could offer. Or because that they all owe all these picks to the Nets and they're still at the door, would you be okay with just like a good player coming back for Kevin Durant?
So I think if it is a Knicks trade specifically, it's probably going to end up being a 3-team deal with a couple things going back and forth. You have to walk a fine line with the Kevin Durant trade because you've kind of sunk yourself by going all in with 3 top-level players and 2 of them playing like top-level players, and KD being one of them. And if you're trading him away, you're cutting that down in half. You also don't have any future or any draft picks. You have draft picks. Let me rephrase that. You have draft picks. You have swapped picks. So we're talking late 20s, 30s. Like, you're going to have the Cavs pick this year. It's going to end up being like the 28th to 30th pick, right? So you have some draft capital, but you don't have your own draft capital. And what you need to do is walk this fine line of Devin Booker has publicly stated, Matt Ishbia has publicly stated that this franchise will not be rebuilding. This is going to be a franchise that is trying to compete, whether that's, making the highest payroll in the NBA every year, probably not, but competing, yes. So you can't just trade for all your future picks for the next decade. Even though some fans would like that, that's not something you do when you have a superstar who just entered his 10th year in the NBA, in Devin Booker, who you have continued to build around and who's brought you to a finals before. So you need to get something back that's, if it's a young player, it's a legit piece that has proven something that can grow with Devin Booker as he hits his prime. Or the Jimmy Butler of it all, where when Kevin Durant turned down the trade to Golden State, they would have gotten Jimmy Butler, that's your win now player, Jonathan Kuminga, that's a swing for the future, and some draft compensation. And I don't know if you're going to be able to get a deal that good in the summer when KD is only going to have 1 year left and now is also coming off of an injury. So what I want is a lot of value. What you'll get is a good amount of value, but you'll not get what you gave up for him. That's just not the world that you're living in. And there's no team that would do that right now because KD's older. And the Suns, quite frankly, are in a compromised position. And if you're in the NBA and you're in a compromised position, you don't get to tell people what you want. They get to tell you what they'll give you.
Is Paul George enough value? No, you don't want the other worst contract in the NBA.
No,
then maybe the Knicks are the team that if they're not trying to rebuild, that maybe the Knicks are the I keep staring at Houston. I think they went and got the Suns picks because they thought maybe Durant could become available. So would you be okay with I wonder if Amen Thompson is off limits now after the season he's had, but what's are you okay with Fred VanVleet and other salary with the picks that would come back potentially being what gets sent back to Phoenix in a deal?
I need a young wing, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr. I don't know if Alpi Şengün is going to be on the table. I don't want Jalen Green. I think Jalen Green would be on the table for Houston. But positionally, especially if you're holding on to Bradley Beal, which should be priority number one, is not holding on to him this summer, but your hand might be forced. You can't have a backcourt of Bradley Beal, Jalen Green, and Devin Booker. That's just not going to work. So Fred VanVleet is fine. I don't want Fred VanVleet, but he does fit in better positionally. It would all be based around the draft picks, and I need at least a wing. And I think, honestly, and we've talked about this a ton, and obviously our offseason is hitting a lot sooner than we expected, so we're going to talk about it soon.
Yeah,
it's going to depend on what happens in the playoffs. If Houston makes a run to the Western Conference Finals, loses in 6 or 7, or somehow beats OKC, gets to the finals, or nobody really flames out in dramatic fashion, nobody's going to look at KD as their quick fix. But if Houston loses in the first round after having the season that they've been having, they might be looking at a KD and be willing to give up more. So I don't even think a true suitor has emerged yet. I think it's going to emerge from who flames out in the playoffs early enough, because the Suns are desperate. You need to find another desperate team to trade with.
Well, believe it or not, there has been, I'll say it's very light, and the Knicks are obviously in a different position than the Suns are, but there's been some, you need to improve this roster this offseason with the Mikal Bridges position. More specifically, Bridges has not been the happiest in New York this year, maybe with his role. Obviously, the comments that were made public about the minutes that he's been asked to play by Tom Thibodeau, which some of it got taken out of context. But what I've said based off of the people that I've talked to is that I'd be less surprised by a Mikal Bridges trade than a Tom Thibodeau firing. But that's the Knicks side of it. That's interesting. It's a similar thing with Mikal Bridges, where you're just not going to get the same value that you gave up. You're not going to get 5 picks in a swap back from Mikal Bridges, and you just have to get the best deal possible if you were to explore that nuclear button that the Knicks, I don't think, should, but may pursue if things are so bad behind the scenes. And with Kevin Durant, it's the same thing, where you're not going to get the same value back, but this is a guy that's probably going to make All NBA this year. And to your point about Budenholzer and maybe the job that he's done, or maybe it's more of a roster construction standpoint, the Suns have 2 All NBA candidates in Booker and Durant, and they're going to miss the play-in. And this reminds me a lot of 2 years ago when maybe 3 years ago when the Lakers had traded for Russ, that first Russ season, where LeBron and AD had All NBA numbers, but they lost 50 games that year. And that kind of leads to where I want to talk about Bradley Beal. You mentioned that one of your priorities for the offseason was seeing, this really does come down to, if you want him out the door, he just eventually has to decide he wants to leave Phoenix. And I know it's been out there. He doesn't want to move his kids again, that he moved them from Washington to LA, and then they moved from LA to Phoenix. And he just it's within his rights to be I want to keep my family in a stable spot. From a basketball standpoint, the on-off numbers are what you said. In 1,258 possessions this year, he's a -8 for the Suns, which the lineup data also would reflect that. What do you see as the best case scenario resolution for the Bradley Beal situation?
Best case is that he gets traded.
Best case realistic scenario.
So here's the thing. In the NBA, we've heard, and obviously, just mentioned Westbrook. We've heard about the vaunted untradeable contract in the NBA every summer for the past decade. Those guys usually end up getting traded. Again, it's going to go to flameouts and a place that Bradley Beal wants to go to. He does hold all the power. I do think that he is unhappy from a basketball perspective here in Phoenix. And I also believe very strongly that this front office, this ownership group, will do anything to make sure that Bradley Beal is not on the roster at the start of next season. I don't think he's a bad person, but I do not think he has been good for the vibes. I don't think that I think as a human being, his priorities are great with his family, but I think as a basketball player, that has leaked into a little bit of a sense of lack of urgency with him. And of course, you have the health stuff, which he can't control, but is still frustrating. You need a team to need offense and trade for him, and hopefully you don't have to attach whatever assets you get in the Kevin Durant trade, but realistically, you might have to do that. If you can move on from Bradley Beal, let's say an Orlando Magic decides that they need more guard-oriented offense, which they absolutely do, you need to do that first. Because if you can move off of Bradley Beal, there's a chance that you can retain Kevin Durant. And like you mentioned, having 2 all-NBA players is certainly a start to reconstruct your roster, but you'll have so much more flexibility considering 50+ million is walking out the door. So realistically, I think that he could be moved. I wouldn't put my money on it, but it's the NBA. We just saw Luka Doncic get traded to the goddamn Lakers, man. Like it can happen.
You just proved proof of concept, by the way, by saying that. There used to be off-limit suggestions when people would say, oh, the Knicks should trade for blank. And I'd respond with, it's not happening. It's crazy. Well, don't even suggest that. But you just said, like, Luka got traded. So no trade is too crazy now to suggest. And I know, like, the Luka rivalry with the Suns for a while, that's got to be tenfold heightened now because Luka's now at the Lakers, right?
Oh, I hate him so much. We were live. So we were doing a post-game show when that trade, it got broke right before we went live. And we immediately scrapped talking about the game for the first segment because like so the Lakers and the Dodgers are just, they're the worst. The scum of the earth. Hate them to my core. Can't stand anything about them, especially that they have superstars. Ugh. Getting Luka and Shohei at the same time is like my personal hell, but it's bad. I mean, we hated the Mavs because the Mavs bounced us in that 60+ win season. They beat us in Game 7 on our home court. Luka and Book have always gone back and forth, and Luka's always had our number. We obviously passed him up in the draft, and then now our biggest rival team just traded for him for not pennies on the dollar, but like quarters on the dollar, you know? So it does make it very disheartening to know that the Lakers are now set up to have a 5-time All-NBA player who hasn't even reached his prime yet. And that's why I'm big and keen on not trading Devin Booker, which some people do, because you very rarely get those one franchise guys.
So just going back to Bradley Beal, and this can how we transition to the game tonight from an X's and O's standpoint. One fix, if he's going to force his hand in staying here and his no trade clause, is I guess just finding a new role for him. Like maybe, I know he came off the bench at a certain point in this season, and I'm curious how successful that was. But do you foresee him becoming, I mean, I don't think this is part of his reputation, but you'd know better, like becoming a malcontent if he's not starting, playing a certain number of minutes? Would he accept, like, hey, this is a marriage that I'm forcing because my family needs to stay in one place, but at least what could work better is me in a different role at this point in my career. Do you foresee that?
Yeah, you know, I'll give Beal credit for this. He has been an incredible professional. He has been put in a very tough situation. This roster is not built for a player like him. It's not built to pay a player like him. He's asked to be a primary point of attack defender, which it's Bradley Beal. Come on, man.
Okay.
He got moved to the bench. He's been asked to play point guard. And he voiced his opinion when he went to the bench. He said, I think I'm a starter, but this is what coach wants and I'll do it. And, you know, he had some impact when he moved to the bench. I think that it's gotten to the point with him where it doesn't really matter when he plays. He's not helping this team, and I do think he's a little out of it. But a bench role is what he needs to be in. Ironically enough, Colin Gillespie, hashtag Nova Boy, he has been really good in the starting lineup for the Suns. It was on the starting lineup for that brief 4-game win streak that restored hope for just a little bit while Beal was out. And he should still be starting. And Bradley Beal should be coming off the bench. And that's just the way that it is. And it sucks, but I don't think there's any role for Beal on this team that properly utilizes the skills that he can bring. And he's just not being aggressive. Again, 1 point against Boston isn't going to cut it. 1 point tonight, it means a certified loss for a team that can't have one.
So let's dive into this matchup. You mentioned that Gillespie is no longer in the starting five. Just noticing from the box score against the Celtics, Gillespie also only played 13 minutes.
Mike Budenholzer.
I guess that's the Budenholzer thing. The fact that Beal came back, played 30 minutes, and as you mentioned, 1 point on 0 for 7 shooting from the field. So if you're a Knicks fan and you're worried about this game potentially, and it's the second night of a back-to-back, they are getting Jalen Brunson back. It's not confirmed, but all indications seem to project that the Knicks will get their captain back. They're also going to get Mitchell Robinson on the second night of a back-to-back actually playing in this game. So if you're a Knicks fan and you're worried about the Suns playing spoiler, we should also mention Kevin Durant not playing in this matchup. What would you say to a Knicks fan that is potentially worried about this matchup?
Devin Booker likes playing in MSG.
The Suns, big shot a couple of years ago.
Huge. One of the highlights of our season.
Face. Yeah.
Devin Booker will be the way this team wins and loses, lives and dies for the rest of the season. Unfairly or fairly so, it's the way that it is. So if Book can get in a rhythm, if Book can get up to 40 and 11, which we've seen him do recently against a good defensive team, it's going to be not rough for the Knicks, but it's going to be rougher. Now, I even think if he does that, this team is broken enough to not win. So it's defensive end. We had a question in here about Ryan Dunn, and I could speak to his whole season later, but by far and away the best perimeter defender that this team has, unceremoniously benched throughout the season, but his defense is brutal against opposing players. I don't know who he's going to get as a matchup. He might be flying around. He can be put on a guy like Brunson. He can be put on a guy like OG, like McHale. He can be versatile in that sense. So him taking one offensive component for the Knicks. I know OG's been playing crazy as of late. And if it's OG, then it's OG, right? If it's McHale, then it's McHale. If it's Jalen, then it's Jalen, because Book's going to have to go somewhere. Beal's going to have to go somewhere. So it's going to be tough to find those matchups, but you need his defense, but you also need Ryan Dunn's offense. His shooting's been really hot and cold this season, and he has been cold and timid as of late. So if you can get some threes from Dunn along with some defense, that could be a major key for upset watch tonight.
Yeah, shout out to Ben Kim Gervey who put this in the chat. Tell us about Ryan Dunn. Several of us thought the Knicks would take him in the draft. He seems very Tibbsy. The Knicks were interested in Ryan Dunn, also a CAA client in Ryan Dunn, which is obviously the connection we all make here in Knicks land. I think they were looking from a financial standpoint, which is why Pacome Dadier ended up being the pick they went with in the first round. They were able to negotiate a lower first-year salary because they're trying to avoid the second apron. But yeah, I remember throughout our draft coverage last year, because the Knicks had 2 first-round picks, that the thought was potentially Ryan Dunn, if you're looking to win now, could be available. I wonder how much he would have played this year under Tom Thibodeau, which I'm sure Suns fans can relate, as you've mentioned, not seeing enough of Ryan Dunn on the court this year. Regardless, the fact that he leads defense first is why I think the Tibbsiness that Ben is referring to makes us curious if he's matched up against Brunson, against one of the other wings on the court tonight. So with the last time the Knicks played the Suns was, I mean, we're talking November, so a lot has happened since then. They were playing a lot of drop, but it was mostly a Nurkic situation. I'm curious if they switch a little bit more. I mean, what matchup do you? Oh, so you're shaking your head no. They're not going to switch.
So they have one switchable big. It's Oso Ighodaro, who should be playing significant minutes going forward throughout the season, despite some of his physical limitations. Mike Budenholzer loves his drop. Ooh, he loves his drop.
Man,
A lot.
we know that from his Milwaukee days.
Yeah,
with Brook Lopez. Yeah.
He's a stubborn guy. He does not change what he wants to do. In fact, like 2 months ago, when things really started going off the rails, I think it was our own Gerald Bourget asked, "Hey, are you considering adjustments to your rotation coaching style, or are you more of a double down type of guy?" No hesitation. Oh, I'm a double down type of guy, which I'm sure you guys can also relate to.
This conversation sounds very familiar. Yeah. Yes.
So, they switch. I mean, it's a modern NBA. They switch for sure, but they don't have this fly around, do everything type of defense. In fact, they don't really have a defense at all.
Yeah, the 27th ranked defense in the league, which
it's worse. It's worse than the numbers too. Like the eye test, the effort is abhorrent. It's god awful. And there are certain possessions and certain nights where they were kind of putting it together, but overall, I think you'll see it today. Every opposing team broadcast that I listen to when the Suns play, or I go back and whatever and watch the highlights or the film again, all I hear is last game against Boston. It was Scalabrini talking about, if you're trying to get right, if you're trying to work on something, play the Pheonix Suns.
Wow.
It's maybe the worst defensive team I've ever watched with my own two eyes.
So the thing I will then ask, because the Knicks with that context may benefit from easing Jalen Brunson back into the rotation with this type of defense they're going to play against. What we've seen a lot since January 1st is that teams are just not putting their center on Karl-Anthony Towns, and they're putting a wing on Cat, putting their center on Josh Hart, and it's how you neutralize any 5-out attack, really. Now, this is some of what the better teams do. I guess the better defensive teams do. But if Budenholzer decides to adopt that, which wing do you think they'd put on Karl-Anthony Towns?
Oh, and then in that case, it's got to be Ryan Dunn, because the only other wing, Cody Martin off the bench would probably get that assignment. Royce O'Neal would get the assignment, probably wouldn't do too well with it. I like Royce, but he's past his defensive prime, especially athletically. He's more of just spot up shooter, smart player. They don't have, like, it would have been KD, right? And that's really unfortunate. Bull's not going to get minutes. He's not consistent. He's not good. And KD would have been that guy, but you don't have him. And so you're going to be putting, if it's Dunn or Martin, we're talking about 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" on 7-foot Karl-Anthony Towns. So you're not even really neutralizing as far as contesting goes with Cat's 3-pointers. And Nick Richards and Oso Ighodaro are fine rebounders. They're not dominant rebounders. So I still think Josh Hart would be able to hold his own in there, because he's just is such an impressive force down low. You're kind of screwed. You don't really have the choice. You don't really have the options. I honestly don't know who they're going to put on Cat. I'm interested myself to see in like a Clockwork Orange type of way.
So that's what's interesting to me in that you actually feed right into, and this is what will actually tell me how locked in Mike Budenholzer still is to this season, or whether he's accepted that the end is near. If they put a center, if they could Ighodaro or Nick Richards on Josh Hart, the Knicks are just going to bring Josh Hart into every action, and it's Jalen Brunson against Mike Budenholzer's traditional drop coverage. It's going to lead to, I almost wish the Knicks would work on stuff tonight, which, maybe they might. They don't really practice, so maybe this is their version of a practice. It might also be like Mikal Bridges. The games he has been good offensively this year have been against drop coverage. So, we'll see. You speak to a defense that the Knicks can work some things out tonight. And I guess so did Brian Scalabrine. We'll see if Devin Booker has anything to say about it. And knowing our luck, this will be the game that you do the 180 on Bradley Beal, because he has like 34 points and just cooks. He's matched up on Cat, and he's the one that shuts him down. But we'll see. Listen, that as weird as it is to say to someone who's been through what you've been through with the Suns this year, this Knicks team has not been as adored by the fan base as they probably should have been.
Yeah.
Which I like to turn over the pod at some point to my guest and see if you have any thoughts or questions about the Knicks from afar, whether how good you think they might be, what you thought of them trading for both former Sun Mikal Bridges or Cat, or just any general questions you have. What are your thoughts on the Knicks this season, Erik?
We actually, funny enough, me and one of my co-hosts, Steven, we did a podcast over the summer breaking down the Timberwolves Knicks trade because the Timberwolves just bounced us for the playoffs. So we felt like it was timely. I was a big fan of the Cat trade. I understood that he has his limitations as a player. The McHale trade, I thought you guys did give up too much, but in a perspective from a team that also gave up a lot to try to win now, I understood where you were coming from. I'm always rooting for my guy, McHale, and campaign. We call him Turbo or Haboob, which is term for a dust storm out here. I'm always rooting for them. And I think that McHale is a good player in this league. I think he's miscast as a top tier offensive option. And I think he showed that in his time here in Phoenix. Not trying to hate on him by any stretch of the means, but he fits in much better in a defensive role where his offense can be as a complement to guys like Devin Booker or Kevin Durant, even though they never got to play together, versus the mainstay in an offense. I think that you guys are good. And I think that from my perspective, being grateful for a good team is something that you guys should be doing. And I know it's easier said than done because we picked apart our teams that were also good. So, it's hard to see it in the moment. I think you guys got big players that can make big shots and have great individual performances, which would bode well in the playoffs. I think OG's recent hot streak has been a very good sign as you guys head into the end of the season because of the positional versatility you now have. You have a guard in Brunson once he gets healthy that can and has proven in the playoffs can step up, ISO score, win a game by himself. Karl-Anthony Towns has foul problems, defensive problems, but offensively is one of the most gifted shooters we've seen from somebody that size. Nightmare matchup in the playoffs defensively when you're able to get him going. And if OG and McHale on the offensive end can also pitch in a good amount of points, you present some pretty big problems. Now, I don't think you're going to win the East. I think that's Cleveland or Boston, but I could see you guys making the Western Conference or Eastern Conference Finals if everything goes right. But if you were in the West, it would be a different time. I still think that you'd be a playoff team, though.
So I do appreciate the projection that we could make the conference finals if things go right. The problem is that the way that the standings are currently, and honestly have been locked in since that January 1st mark that I'm talking about, it's been Cleveland, Boston, New York, which would mean the Knicks would have to go through Boston to get to the conference finals. And look, if you told me before the season, the Knicks, their season will end at the hands of the Boston Celtics, I would, okay, yeah, I'm hoping it's not a terrible season, but a lot of teams will probably have their seasons and their hopes and dreams shattered by the Boston Celtics. It's just to have another season end in the second round. I think it's what a lot of people are coming to terms with. It's like we went through the cycles of grief already if you're mourning that a season is going to end. But we did, a lot of Knicks fans, I should say, did it in January. And now they're just forced in this stage of acceptance to find the things you like about a 3 seed that the fan base doesn't have much of an attachment to. I am with you that be grateful for what you have because you don't know how much worse it could be, should be the perspective. It's why I've tried to find new things. Like you mentioned Cat and some of his defensive issues. They exist. Like Tibbs has mostly played him in drop this year because the moment he starts switching or starts playing at the level is when the foul issues show up. So you almost want to save those more aggressive switches and those schemes for better teams, for more dire situations, which is why I think you'll see a lot of drop coverage tonight in this matchup. But like I've enjoyed Karl-Anthony Towns and like getting to know him as a person, the way he handled the whole Draymond Green situation where Draymond ran his mouth. I'm sure being
Draymond Green, man, what a bum. The media tour that he's going on to try to milk this defensive player of the year is just so pathetic. But anyway, I digress.
It'll be funny if it works. Like I will say, it will be funny if it works.
He wasn't on the odds a month ago, and now he's like a minus 450. What the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
This is just how Joel Embiid won an MVP a couple of years ago. Doing the same media tour. Look, I appreciate you saying to our fan base that like be happy for what you have, because I think especially Knicks fan, and this is honestly, Erik, what I've gotten all season is that some of the newer Knicks fans that are more online, like want to fire the coach, want someone traded, hate Josh Hart now. And it's the older Knicks fans that experienced the 2000s and maybe experienced some of the Isiah Thomas years that are like, no, be very grateful for where we are. Also, when I go outside the Knicks market and I get to talk to people like you or just people that cover other teams or the NBA in general, it's like the Knicks are competent. They should be happy for competent because we've seen what 2 decades of incompetence can look like. Look, I think a lot's going to be determined about their future in the playoffs. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens. Before we get out of here, we have some people watching live and we've got some super chats and some questions for you.
Let's go.
Start with good old Jonathan Macri. He asks, going back to his preseason comments, who are the 3 teams that Matt Ishbia said would not trade places with the Suns? During the offseason, Matt Ishbia said that 26 teams want to trade places with them or would trade places with them right now based off of what the roster was at the time. Who were the 3 teams that he thought wouldn't trade places with them in the offseason?
Now, I might be mistaken, but I don't think he named specific teams. I'm sure, and if he did, Boston is definitely in there considering they came off of a championship. I found that comment to be funny. Now I find it to be mortifying.
Yeah.
Psycho Blue, who is one of our diehards, always in with our show, says the 3 teams were Philly, Boston, and Dallas. Whoops.
Oh, well,
did he say Philly, Boston, and Dallas? I'm not 100% sure. Obviously that comment has aged extremely poorly. I don't think a lot of teams would switch spots with the Suns.
How do you feel about Ishbia? And I know this is coming off of like decades and decades of Sarver, so there was a hint of like you get a new owner, things hopefully change. We talked about baseball earlier, like as a Mets fan,
yeah,
becoming the Steve Cohen team that just
very different.
Right. Like it's night and day. And that was always the hope that you go from the Wilpons who lost all that money with Bernie Madoff to this. And now we're a big market team again. Has it been like the grass wasn't greener with Sarver, or like where are you these days?
First of all, Robert Sarver is scum of the earth human being. So let's just put that out there. And I'm not going to be in the business of telling you that any billionaire is a good person. But Robert Sarver is a bad guy. He has done some bad things. And that's not even talking about the basketball side of it. The only time that this team has had, not the only time, but the first time in a long time this team had a championship contender team, the 7 seconds or less Pheonix Suns. He cheaped out. And he refused to pay the players that needed to be paid. And he traded players for cash. And of course, the Amari stuff. Amari's gone. Sean Marion's gone. He fumbled it. And then luckily they lucked their way into getting Chris Paul, but that was Devin Booker, right? That wasn't Robert Sarver. And they made it to the finals, right? So that technically all happened under Sarver. When Ishbia got, and I was covering local sports and local sports radio when Ishbia bought the team. And, I'm a very big fan and proponent of and appreciative of an owner who's willing to write the checks and to win now. And I think you have to mentally separate, which is hard as a fan, the result versus the intention. I will take an owner who's willing to put the highest payroll out in the NBA. What he's done to the facilities is second to none. What he's done with the Mercury is second to none. What he's done with the community is second to none. We're talking about giving away free antennas and then putting the Suns on public television so you can watch them for free. $2 concessions. I went there with my wife for the Grizzlies game that KD scored 30K points. I bought 2 waters and food, and I paid under $10 for concessions, right? So there are so many things that he's done well. That being said, whether it's him pushing the buttons or the front office that he's employed pushing the buttons, they have made the wrong aggressive win now moves. # new owner syndrome. We talked about the Brooklyn Nets earlier. So, that they know a lot about that.
They know that. Yeah.
And that sucks. But honestly, without retrospect, without hindsight, I would still do the Bradley Beal trade. even with hindsight, I would do the Kevin Durant trade. Now, obviously, with hindsight, I'd say keep Bradley Beal the hell away from my team. But, in the moment, those moves were not maligned. People miss the twins, Cam and McHale, and the picks, but you got Kevin freaking Durant, right? So I will always take an owner who's willing to make mistakes going all in versus one that makes a mistake ruining something that you should be going all in on. You're just at the dark side of that right now. So that makes it harder to appreciate.
The infrastructure that you're speaking to, I think, is the part of the calculation that fans don't appreciate, that like the concessions, the community work, the stuff that, and like, that's, I mean, just to bring it back to baseball, that's the stuff I think in the beginning was being appreciated with Steve Cohen and the Mets, and they just hadn't had that winning follow with the infrastructure to it. So hopefully that's changed too, because last year was fun and this year's off to a great start.
How'd you guys enjoy that wild card, huh? You guys like that?
Listen,
yeah?
I enjoyed the Mets making the playoffs on the
second
to last day of the regular season, and potentially potentially at the expense of the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Potentially.
But I mean, literally at the expense of
there we go. Don't worry, I don't hold grudges.
Well, listen, the grudge also should be at the Mets. It should be at the Diamondbacks. So if you're going to hold grudges,
they're better. They're going to be good this year. Ketel Marte's injured now, but they're going to be good this year.
The rotation looks outstanding, especially with Corbin Burns basically taking the place of Jordan Montgomery.
Big upgrade.
Apologies, everybody, for the baseball talk. He started it, not me.
Sorry, my bad.
As you can probably imagine, the Yankee Met thing has been a thing, especially since December 7th, when a date which for me will live in infamy, because it was the day Juan Soto chose the New York Mets over the Yankees. Two more super chats. One from Juanon. Thank you, Juanon. What's the Isiah Thomas of it all, and why is this conversation triggering flashbacks? #fired tips.
So, there's obviously nothing confirmed with Isiah Thomas. However, him and Matt Ishbia are very close friends, very trusted confidants, and have been well before his time in Phoenix. I would not be surprised if he has some influence over here, but in no official capacity. Even Ishbia has said that he's a smart guy and that he's been around the league for a long time, so he takes what he says like very seriously and he listens to him. I don't really know what else to say besides that. I get why it's triggering flashbacks. It should, considering what happened with Isiah Thomas in the state of New York. But I don't know. If right now my biggest problem was Isiah Thomas with this franchise, I'd be a much happier guy.
I appreciated a couple of years ago, there was, you want to talk about media tours, there was like an Isiah Thomas media tour where he tried to portray that his Knicks years weren't that bad. And there was a push that actually, like, when you look at the draft picks and the context and some of the trades did, like, no, like, I experienced it. This went from a team that rolled out of bed, won 50 games, made the playoffs, and then for an entire decade, this team struggled to get to 33 wins and avoid 50 losses in a season. You were the overseer of the entire situation. Hall of Fame player, I think, underrated to history, and I think that's the context that I think is necessary with Isiah Thomas. One of the worst front office executives in the history of the sport as well.
Agreed.
Yeah. Last question. Well, appreciate that. Last question comes from, you said one of your people from PHNX. So
you want me to read this one?
Please do. Psycho Blue SFXT. So go ahead.
So he has this thing called Basketball Cthulhu. That's basically basketball god.
Okay.
More or less. So it says Basketball Cthulhu thinks a bad coaching hire is more damaging than a poorly constructed roster because there's no way to tweak it if a clueless putz is manning the ship. See Detroit and Monty versus Bickerstaff. Yeah. Coaching has been bad. I'll say, to say the least, I think Mike Budenholzer should have been fired a long time ago.
So I had a long conversation last night with someone about like what changes the Knicks could make this offseason. I've come around to the idea, if you can get to the second round, like push the Celtics to 6, then Like that's something to build off of, especially with how the regular season went. I keep going back to, if you are going to make a significant change, probably look at the head coach spot. Tibbs is just so, like, he hasn't done a fireable job this year is what I go to. Because you're so all in, I don't know what significant changes you could make that aren't somewhat nuclear. And then, whereas a new coach could potentially just create a different offense that's less heliocentric, less like more ball movement, gets OG and this version of OG more involved. Having said all of that, like, the assistant coach of the team is Jalen Brunson's dad. Like, I don't know how you break up that type of culture and that structure and make your best player still happy with the structure, unless, and this is not what I want, Jalen Brunson's dad gets promoted to head coach, which you want to talk about suddenly becoming too Godfather oriented. You don't want Fredo eventually becoming the head of the family. So that's how I feel there. Anyway,
moving on from a coach doesn't always help, but sometimes it does. We had 49 wins from Frank Vogel, and we wanted to move on from him, and look at where we are now.
Yeah. I think the last thing we'll say is, like, I mean, you look at what happened with Monty Williams at the end. That seemed to be, I mean, from an outsider's perspective, like, he won Coach of the Year, and then 2 years later, like, they trade for Kevin Durant, and then he gets fired. But then you see what happened in Detroit, and you're like, oh, so they were justified in moving on from Monty Williams. I mean, do you even have anyone on the radar of that, like, as the coach, is like who I want to come in here and fix things?
Oh, for sure. We've done full podcasts breaking down a bunch of stuff. I mean, in a world where you could get whoever you want, if you're going to trade for somebody, I mean, a Ty Lue would be incredible. I would love to poach Becky Hammond from Las Vegas. Sam Cassell, longtime assistant coach, now with the Boston Celtics. He has earned a head coaching opportunity. Chris Quinn in Miami has been a Miami culture guy for about a decade. I really like Nate Oates in Alabama. And I think if you're going to hire a new coach, I don't want an NBA retread. I would like either a coach that's currently doing well, like a Ty Lue, or a fresh face. Taylor Jenkins is an interesting name, but I don't think that Taylor Jenkins is going to be on the Suns' radar, unfortunately. And I don't love him as a coach. I think Chauncey Billups is somebody that I have heard is on the Pheonix Suns' radar. I would not be shocked if the Suns move on from Mike Budenholzer, which I believe they will, if Chauncey Billups ends up being that guy. But a lot of time before we figure that out.
Well, we will see what happens with the Pheonix Suns this offseason, and potentially if it involves the New York Knicks, and whether we're doing another pod in the summer sometime.
Hit me up.
Because Kevin Durant happened. Erik, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much for helping me preview this matchup and giving us a big picture look at the Pheonix Suns. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and all your stuff.
Yeah, so for PHNX Suns and over here at PHNX, we cover sports a little differently. We go live 5 days a week, even throughout the off season. During the season, we do pregame shows 30 minutes before. I'm going to get Andrew on for a couple of minutes after this, pre-record a little something. So he's going to be on our pregame show as well. Super fun live chat format, just like you guys have here. We'll read all your super chats on screen. And we're going through it. So if you just want to watch somebody go through it, you can come watch us go through it. Talk a little crap as well if you've deserved it. You can find us on YouTube. It's very easy. PHNX Sports. It'll be the first thing that pops up. Cover all the local teams here, especially when we take on a Mets, right? Or if we play a Giants or whatever it is. We'll have pregame, postgame shows, coverage of all of that if you're trying to get an Arizona perspective. Of course, you can follow Suns on social at PHNX_Suns. And you can follow me at ERIKRUBY.
So, to your point about invading other teams' postgames and specifically other teams' channels, we've done that a lot this year when it comes to to the Miami Heat. We always do it. To any Sixers pregames I do. The rivals we do. The important thing is, you said, if they deserve it. I think the Suns have earned the Dallas treatment where we're like, hey, good game if the Knicks win. Like, we you know what? Good job. That was competitive.
Fair.
Thank you.
That's fair.
unless you win tonight, then it'll just be
Ooh.
fire and brimstone on our side of things. But we'll see what happens. As he mentioned, you could catch the a portion of the PHNX pregame show for the Suns, where I'll be making an appearance. But we'll obviously have to get Erik back on in the future because this was a lot of fun. Thank you, Erik, for joining me, and thank you to everybody for joining me for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. I will be back on Tuesday to preview the next matchup against the Boston Celtics. Hopefully they have everything clinched by then, so I don't have to hear the media tour about how they haven't beaten the top two teams in the Eastern Conference yet this year. And it won't matter if the Celtics win or if the Knicks win. It'll just be a part of LA Fitness Week. As far as we have to make the announcement again that we will be with Iman Shumpert on Friday at Torches NYC, which is across the street from T Squared Social from 3 to 8 p.m. As well as on after the Torches event, we will be at T Squared Social to watch the Knicks take on the Cleveland Cavaliers. So please join us for that. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.